first time. Maybe a little too much patience.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. Too much patience.
Well, it's a tension in my life.
Yeah.
Because I do literally want to try for this goal of living physically and thriving physically for 300 years straight. And I can see that changing my psyche and my attitude in the present moment. But then it's like in tension against like, well, I have needs now, I have interests now, I have careers to build now. I want both.
Are you like counting on advancements in cybernetic technology?
I'm not counting on anything. I'm just gonna do it.
I'm counting on advancements in cybernetic technology.
I do think that the only way for those cybernetic enhancements and technology to actually get you there is by doing what I'm doing. The human mind cannot fathom more than a human lifespan. The psyche is not built to be that adaptable, not built to be that flexible, not built to preside over as many psychic deaths and rebirths as that requires. The uploaded mind would go insane and self-delete around the same time a human body would anyway.
I suspect, or shortly thereafter, I suspect you're right about that.
Like these LE enthusiasts.
Life extension.
Yes,
Yeah.
they focus on the biological code of it and the technology of it without recognizing the inner universe part is completely necessary to abiding more than your peers, because all your friends are gonna die. What the fuck are you gonna live for? And it's not like even in the normal lifespan we've answered any question in any meaningful way about the meaning of all this.
You know, that is
And you'd fucking need meaning to even make it to 60.
That is it's really interesting you take that angle on it, because I was just listening that Peter Thiel interview that I linked to you.
Teal.
Thank you. I've always read it as Thiel.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Peter Thiel.
Yeah. He had this. He was being interviewed by. This was from a couple years ago. It was just. I thought, like, first of all, it was just really nice to watch an interview from the before times.
It's weird.
Where like
it's
people,
fucking weird. I can't like take it seriously as much. Like I did that whole. Hold on to that.
Yeah, sure.
I did that whole interview with Peter, old Catholic guy.
Yeah. The one I linked to you, is just that one there?
And then I went looking for like current Peter Thiel interviews to like, okay, that's what you thought before.
So how have you reevaluated
what
things?
the fuck do you think now?
I know.
And I couldn't find it. I couldn't find anything.
Maybe he got wise that he needs to like
well, I think he is wise, and I think
so.
he's wisely keeping his fucking mouth shut until he has a systems, a gestalt understanding
of what the fuck
is going on.
Yeah.
I think he's wise enough to not fucking open his mouth and act like he's making sense of things when we're in the center of a black hole fucking wormhole alien monolith experience.
I think most people have he's somewhat uniquely positioned in that he has a lot more to lose than he has to gain by having any sort of public presence, in the cultural space. He doesn't benefit from that so much. He's kind of a very hidden actor.
But you're enjoying an interview with Thiel from 2019.
2019, yeah, just because they were able to talk about things that weren't somehow tangentially related to COVID, and it was like refreshing. And
Sure.
It made me remind me of like, oh yeah, there's like all this other narrative that also is like happening right now.
All these other moving pieces
Yeah,
that were
exactly.
understandably the biggest moving pieces to focus on
Right, at the time.
until they weren't. But
Exactly.
they're still just as big
Yeah.
and definitely moving and helping
Yes.
inform this experience we're having.
Yes. He was being interviewed by, what's that guy's name? Like Peter
H.
Yeah.
Holderman or
Yeah, something like
something.
that. Yeah, and he was a super good interviewer, and it was just really nice to watch this like extremely, just like very like this extremely like polite, curious exchange between these two people. Where the way he was interviewing, he wasn't coming to the table with like an agenda. He was just like, I really want to understand what exactly are you saying? And he had like these quotes of his that from other like essays he'd written and stuff, and he kept putting them on the screen. And like one of the quote he led off with was this something that apparently Peter Thiel had written about, like I think it was like around 2004 or something like that. But he was kind of building off of the work of this French philosopher called René Girard, who had this idea that the European Enlightenment, the ascendance of the rational mind over like religious authority, the kind of the rise of science, like that represented in some sense like a strategic retreat. That was the word he used. And the reason he said that was because in his view, the Enlightenment was a retreat from the question of human nature itself. And that like, there'd been so many religious wars in Europe that had kind of soured people's view on religion in general, and it was seen as like this kind of bargain where it's like, well, we'll just set aside this question, we'll pretend it doesn't exist and isn't relevant, and in exchange what we'll get is not having to fight about it. We'll kind of get away from the violence if we can just kind of sit down and talk about maybe more trivial things. And it's kind of an open question. It's like I don't know if maybe we've come completely full circle now, which is why we're talking about it again. Like that was kind of my thought, was that we're getting to a point we're like in the 21st century, and the technology, that like the path that the Enlightenment set Western civilization on was one of increasing technology that eventually led us to being able to create something like AI, which now re-asks the question that we were getting away from. If you accept that was what the Enlightenment was motivated by, was an intention to get away from religious questions. Like, so our technology has now re-presented those questions, and it's coming up again. So the prediction from that model of looking at things is that religion can no longer be kept in the unconscious. It cannot be put into the shadow of civilization anymore, and it's going to spring back up. And if you look at the 20th century, you might see a few little signs in hindsight of that happening too, like the economic ideology conflict that happened in the 20th century. It's possible to take a lens on that understands those wars between capitalism and communism as kind of like religious wars in a way. It's one lens to take on it. I don't think it's as strong a lens as otherwise, but definitely now there's something about our politics that feels very much like a religious war, because we're not talking about material things anymore. We're talking about human nature again.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
And I'm high on nicotine.
That was my first pass on it.
That was Peter Thiel's contrarian take on the Enlightenment, that a kind of rational blank out is what made the Enlightenment possible, as if we didn't actually answer any of the conflicts of meaning that the religious wars represented. And it's undeniable that we got everything. We got
Yeah.
the power of God
Yeah.
by shelving the question for a while.
Yes.
Really, we got it by going ahead with the Judeo-Christian direction of it.
Yes.
And letting the issue rest and just building on the Judeo-Christian conceits. It's insoluble, let's move on to what we can work on.
Right.
Turns out what we can work on, at that point, there's a fucking lot of shit to work on. And here we are, we have everything the Enlightenment way of thinking has given us. We have a kind of peacetime in which the individual mind can thrive. I think a new, in terms of today, his one of his points was that that's one of the first cause levels of discourse that you need to engage with if you're going to answer questions about reality in the deepest sense possible, is the religious wars are the symptom of these deeper questions. I think the new religion is going to look like a kind of understanding that every single person has to start from the bottom and create their own answers to these deepest levels of meaning and these deepest levels of questioning. There can't be a script that you follow that's just not resilient and adaptable enough. You have to make your own answers. And the new religion is just a rubric of how to think and how to ask questions on the deepest levels possible.
I would agree with you that that is the end state. That's where we're going eventually, is a radical decentralization of religious authority. And it doesn't seem like that now, though, because we're going through kind of a transitional phase where we're coming down from this point.
The decentralization of religious authority is the Enlightenment. That's what it is. The Judeo-Christian thing gave way to a focus on the individual and a recognition that if you're thinking, you can solve problems, and everyone has a thinker, and so everyone can potentially solve problems.
But that went along with
there's no priest caste.
That went along with the that in the Enlightenment, that went along with the deprioritization of the religious experience. There was even a point like in the late 19th century where many scientists conceived of the world as that's like the foundation of our cultural assumption about the world being kind of blind energy, where you have the billiard ball reality and Newton's physics and a deterministic step-by-step pixel clockwork universe where every single thing is infinite, is exhaustively explainable through reductionistic analysis of the past. That thing, I'm deeply familiar with that lens because that's the lens I carried through most of my life. That everything makes sense in the most mathematical way we just don't understand. And that belief still haunts my consciousness. But I've grown to recognize that is a religious belief itself. That there are no patterns above the level that we're conscious of. We're very aware of the patterns below us. We're very aware of the patterns that compose us, but we're quite blind to the patterns that we compose. And the weird thing, we talked about this before, but like ecological levels composed of increasingly integrated abstractions, cells, bodies, societies, patterns don't sit at their own level. Higher level patterns have a way of reaching down and manipulating the lower level patterns that compose them, thus creating feedback systems. Like our cell, for instance, our brain is made of cells, but we decide to smoke a cigarette which then influences our, so we're doing something, we're doing some kind of, we're creating some kind of feedback in this like ecological stack, this software stack of reality. And I think what's different about nowadays is that though we have maintained this kind of decentralization of religious authority, the question is being reprioritized in people's mind because religion hung around as a cultural and personal, as a cultural thing far longer than it hung around as a institutional government system. Because the Enlightenment might have led to the overthrow of religious political authority, explicit religious political authority, like the king and the church and stuff like that. And you had the French Revolution, and you had implementation of like secular forms of blah blah blah. I mean, thank you. Appreciate that. Some real time editing there. So nowadays, though, it's only been in the last few decades, really, that we've also did like the final courtesy flush of the toilet on religion as a personal thing. That like, if you wouldn't go to somebody like 40 years ago and be like, big questions of life, why are we here, universe, and oh my God, just like, and okay, I'm good, so I'm gonna go back to just like working on my hot rod. Life is beautiful. Okay, that's why when you look at the 50s, 60s, kind of like this idyllic, weird little time in the history of our civilization, at least America, where people were like, it still felt good, and they had like community, church, potlucks, and just like families and stuff like that, and also technology. Fuck yeah, golden age, baby. But it couldn't last. It was not stable, because. So yeah, we have a crisis of meaning because we don't have those. We're really, truly not. Maybe the most non-religious time was like the early 2000s when we were in high school. Maybe that was the real low point. I feel like ever since like the last decade was the re-acceleration towards a new kind of. That was the first inklings that a new religion was coming to the world. And I think coronavirus, COVID shit, and all of the kind of like, there's just like the crisis of like values that this has caused our civilization is really like the first shot in a new struggle for meaning of like, what is life about? What do we value more? What's important, the individual or the collective, or like, why are we even doing anything? Like, there's a huge labor shortage. I can't help but wonder if perhaps the reason for that labor shortage is just is something that like economists have a very hard time measuring, which is like people's willingness to get a job because they wonder why they're doing it, beyond any sort of like metrics like unemployment insurance, all that stuff like that. But just like, people have become quite reflective out of necessity, and it's interesting to see how this is going to play out.
That mechanistic thing that got started in the Enlightenment did get us further and further away from the mystical experience, which of course the church had already like done its best to get in the way of the mystical experience anyway. But then a mechanistic understanding started to like draft a script of reality that took the mystical experience completely out. And the mystical experience is the individual conscious mind experiencing a harmony of the higher structures and the human and the lower structures in one experience, integration of all those things. And as far as being more or less unaware of the higher structures, the mystical experience looks like an intrusion of those higher structures into your daily moment. And that's the whole other half of existence. So the farther and farther away you get from it, the more of a rubber band effect that creates. And ecological disasters, personal disasters, great revelations, great personal transitions, or something like COVID, where life, the real world comes in and just batters down your front door and forces you to confront your individuality, because the subconscious and the unconscious knows that the only way to survive is to get an influx of more of the mystical experience. The only place that that experience can be had is in the silence of your own solitude. And so in that way, we subconsciously manifested an excuse to sit with ourselves and let all the moving, let the world of 10,000 things just die down, so we could feel that invisible hum of electricity that is the flow of life itself. And that's not meant to be, that's a neutral experience. It's not meant to be a pleasant experience. It's completely personal what is waiting for you when you get there. But that enlightenment, scientific, mechanistic understanding, while it did help us conquer the natural world in a necessary way, it did create a stretching rubber band effect where we would have to circle back around, or be forced to look at it by circumstance, circle back around to the basic, deepest levels of questioning, which those religious wars of the Middle Ages represented.
Yeah, the climate change thing is like what we expect is our just punishment for our sins of conquering the natural world. And that's why it's almost an article of faith that we're gonna all get fucked up.
Gosh, in that sense, like, everyone in America is religious.
Yeah.
It's just the actual religious people, like, have a language about it, know their stance about it, or their group's stance about it. But then everyone on the left has just pushed it into the unconscious, which just, like they still believe in it, though, obviously, because they're literally expecting God to strike them with a lightning bolt for abandoning him.
Yeah.
And so all they fucking talk about is climate change.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of parallels that you can understand this line of thought, and I don't really want to disparage it, because I don't think I'm more interested in just articulating what it is. But whatever you would call it, like wokeism or postmodern ethics, or sort of the religion of the urban upper middle classes, the managerial class, corporate HR, whatever associations you have with this. This new strain of thought, which is hilariously identified with the left, just through historical happenstance. Whatever this strain of thought is in some sense, it can be understood as the latest iteration of American Protestant evangelicalism.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah, and so you have, like, in the past you had this worldview, you had these these widely held premonitions or expectations of the apocalypse that were kind of sanctified by clerical authority and with reference to scripture. And now these same things are sanctified by, like, academic authority with reference to scientific studies.
And it's the exact same grift of the priest caste is, apocalypse is coming, you better fucking do what we tell you, or it's gonna be worse than it already is gonna be.
Yeah, and I think the reality is probably quite complex. I think that as someone who, I was like a physics major, I've been steeped in science for my entire fucking life, so it's not like like I've really thought about climate change and the Earth and the ecological system as a whole system for a very long time, and there are, you don't need scientists to tell you that climate change is happening to know climate change is happening. It absolutely is happening. Like, there are many large-scale ecological disasters that are occurring, not just climate change. It's kind of like COVID is the disease that everyone focuses on, in the same way that carbon dioxide is the thing that everyone latches onto, when, like, there's a tremendous amount of other things that potentially could be even more destructive in the long term, like pollution of the aquifers with like chemicals that fuck up your hormones, or who knows, you know what I mean? But because of the nature of political discourse, you tend to focus on one thing. Anyways, that being said, I think that a disservice is done to any sort of scientifically credible effort to address the problem of climate change when it becomes a religion. And I've started to suspect that a lot of premonitions of doom about climate change are probably not that well founded. My gut instinct is telling me that after seeing the way science has become utterly politicized during COVID, it has caused me to have this kind of skepticism where I go, I don't actually necessarily think that climate change is happening the way the scientific establishment has reached a consensus of. Now, here's the thing. It could be even worse, or it could be better. I'm not, it's not that I think that they're making it seem worse than it is. I'm saying that they're actually lessening their own ability. Science is giving up its own ability to be objective when it becomes politicized. So
Yeah.
I do think climate change is absolutely happening, and I think politicization weakens our tool set to deal with the actuality of it. Because, like, what if, for instance, there's some kind of weird feedback loop? Just as, like, hypothetical, I'm not saying this is likely, but, like, what if, for instance, there was some kind of weird feedback loop where, like, actually it turns out we were wrong, and what's really going to happen is that an ice age is what's going to fuck us up. Not because then as soon as it becomes a little bit warmer, something happens in the ocean, and some weird complex feedback dynamic system happens where, like, instead of ice melting, it freezes over. Like, I mean, it's entirely possible. It's a chaotic system. Other times in the Earth's past, there have been ice ages triggered by various events like meteor impacts, volcanoes, all this stuff. So I feel like that because we're so dogmatically, we've created like this religious image around a certain outcome, we're almost like destined to believe that now. We're completely committed to this concretized version of what used to be kind of like a objective process that's now become like sublimated to the personal kind of. And yeah, it's very Adam Curtis-esque, this personalization of like the universal.
Leaning hard on my patterns, baby. I had a sort of mystical experience last night where I had the night ahead of me, very hard, very productive day, from like 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then I was excited and ready to really leverage 3 more hours to the greatest effect possible. And my intuition just couldn't catch torque on any particular activity at all, and kept just nudging me into something else, some open space. And I just calmed down and started listening really deeply in my apartment, and just got very quiet inside and curious, tried to feel where I was and where my yes was active, and the guidance I was listening for led me to this more open space, this more open, empty space of the psyche. And I just sat there for a couple hours in my apartment and like got around and just walked around in circles and breathed and touched objects. And
This was a no drugs, no nothing, just sober walking around touching objects.
the only psychedelic input was physical reality and the certain knowledge that I'm pretty fucking lost in it right now.
Yeah.
And that tiredness I've been speaking to in a depressed context here had burned out to just an open plane of zero activity, zero interest, and openness and curiosity, and willing to just let an empty moment intrude into my reactive flow of event, action. That action was just to move into a psychological space of non-action and see what was there and see what emptiness was like. And I could spin it in like medicinal terms of like, well, I certainly need something. I have a profound need for something, some new influx of zest for life, or like things to find meaningful. And so it makes a kind of logical sense. If you need something new, first you have to open up a space
for it, yeah.
For something to happen.
Like you just got to take all your furniture and push it to the side and just like have an empty spot.
Yeah. And that's what I did last night. Was I just psychologically moved into an empty spot, and there wasn't any resistance of like, oh my gosh, I don't like have any will to live or will to create, then what am I?
Right.
It was just like, I don't need a will to create, I don't need a will to live. I'm just gonna look at this open space and be in not a void, but the benevolent kind of void, an open plane.
Yeah, just like a vast stretch of empty sand or something. Just like not necessarily like not malicious, not threatening, just something. Yeah. It's it's really easy to become attached to the like event thing. Very familiar with that. Your will is not responsible for making you alive. You know, your life comes before your will, and you can fall back on that basic living. Probably good to do so from time to time. Where do you expect that the new? Do you think that something will come from the depths of your unconscious and take its rightful place in that void, or do you expect it to come from the outside world? How do you see that happening?
I don't know. Those things happen together pretty often.
Yeah.
I always wish for something to come from the outside.
Just because it would be new.
Please. Well, in a child sense,
Yeah.
Can I please have some help here?
Yeah.
Can I please catch a break? And I've been like hoping to catch a break ever since I struck out on a path of my own. When I was like 22 or 23, stepped outside of the cultural narrative of how you're supposed to build a stable career to follow my heart instead. I've been like, I had a huge influx of magical thinking at that time to help me make that jump that, well, I'll be caught. Someone will catch me. No.
Terrence McKenna, like, just leap into the abyss. It's a feather bed. That's what he says.
No one caught me. But I've never hit any bottom either.
Okay.
And so it's just a kind of free fall where
So you're still a Gandalf, just like...
apparently
Yeah.
where I apparently have infinite time to build my own like set of wings, while I wait to catch a break. So in all those years of like, man, it'd be really nice to have some help here. In like any real help that's ever like occurred has just been like self-generated so far. What do I expect to come on the other side of this? Just I mean, I can like project along the general trajectory and know that there will be more art out of me, better art, more clear focus, more laughter, more joy, more ability to make money. And I know the rest of the album will come from this.
Yeah. Yeah, that album is going to be... I think when you finish that, that's going to be a real significant pivot point.
It's the most significant thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to track because the first album was the most significant thing for 4 years. Mm-hmm. And then the reciprocation from the world for having made it was 0. So that was a cognitive dissonance there, where like I just created my life, I just saved my soul,
and everyone's just like, okay,
yeah, and so like the fruit of doing that was infinite. It was the food of the gods. So it's not like I'm not gonna make another better one, but I can no longer spend much time waiting to catch a break. And that is what sets me back onto this first cause level of experience, where I have to really wring the juice out of the fruits I have. Like, breathing has to be the reciprocation from the world of giving me a pat on the back, taking a good shit, having good food. But I do think like there's an exponential effect having 2 sovereign, completely original, full magnum opuses of original art, is exponentially more able to act on the world than one. At least it will like attract more particles of itself at a much faster rate to itself.
Yeah. I think you need like I don't know, this is hard because I'm like, obviously in a similar situation. We both have this experience of creating something that's like profound, and then also realizing that not only are we in the role of creator, but we're also in the role of like chief marketer and like like hype man. Um, so it's there's almost like this kind of art. It's very easy to think that it's like that kind of thing is like beneath you as a creator, to just go out and spend. It feels weird just like shilling the thing that you made. But I think it's just like you just have to do it, and you have to have a pragmatic marketing strategy. Marketing is a stupid word. I hate it. You have to have a pragmatic strategy for like bringing awareness of the thing that you made to other people, because we're living in a world that's like so just like swimming with possible things that you could pay attention to. There has to be something
See,
very...
I'm in tension against this
I
whole
know,
thing,
I know,
because that's not the level of creativity that I give any shit about.
I know, it's tough.
Like, I'd much rather just do what I care about until a middleman whose art is outreach to find me and do that work for the project. So I'm not good at that. I don't really care to be good at that.
But that's what you just said is very pragmatic. Maybe maybe that process of promoting it is finding someone to do it as a tool to do it. But ultimately,
and
you're
like,
doing that.
Like, I understand that it comes down on me.
Yeah.
But the way I do steps of progress is very much based in my body and in my physical sense of what's within my reach and turns me on right now to do. And like, we're in a world where like it takes like Instagram and Zuckerberg himself to enact any kind of outreach. And I just like I'm forming my own reactions and actions about that and figuring out the way I can react or interact with that in a way that's fun, while at the same time being highly doubtful that that's actually necessary. I mean, enter Stuart Bowman, who just has a much better social network idea to build culture on. That's a reflection of this stink that I smell around the whole necessity to pay Zuckerberg marketing dollars to get outreach for my art piece I made. Like, is that really the way to do it?
It feels very stagnant and like kind of like we're just going through the motions of
like, aren't I an artist? If I don't like that way, like, can't there be another way that like I just make up?
Well, that's I think that like, oh god, here they come. All right, we're gonna have to move. They're major advertisers and funding sources and political backers.
Right.
So like even just by accident, you won't be able to get your message out if you're doing something that doesn't connect with one of those prerogatives. So it's I think it's like social media has become very inorganic. That's like the trend. It's going towards a kind of manicured mall parking lot feel.
Well, that's the way of things. It's a natural progression of huge successes as it gets homogenized and by being made available to the maximum number of people and the maximum amount of different demographics, it becomes this very whitewashed, ineffective, boring place.
Yeah. I had this interesting thought yesterday about a new form of speech that exists now that didn't before.
and that is curation. In the in the past, there's been like musicians that were censored. There have been writers that have been censored. There have been speakers that have been physically censored, and like we still have all those mediums today, but we have a new medium, which is the feed. The feed is a fundamentally new thing. Of course, there's been editorial, there's been editors and stuff but not on the same real-time level and not on the same scope and breadth of aggregating information that exists now. Mm-hmm. The feed, the person who decides, it's not the person who says something, who creates something, who communicates something, but the person who decides out of the millions of people who are communicating something, which of those things you're going to see. So that's almost like organizing trying to consolidate and find the valuable things and put them together into a space that is in line with the amount of time that people actually have to look at things is a new form of communication. It's like kind of meta. It's like meta speech. And I had this idea that organizing what you look at needs to be democratized just as much as information itself. And it's really, really, really weird that we are all looking at the same narrow selection of things on the front page of few different, or it's being done by algorithms. I was like thinking about that, like, isn't that kind of very like anti-humanistic in some sense that like we are not, like, wouldn't it be nice to know that the reason why you're looking at a specific list of items is because some individual person chose those items to be the ones you looked at, instead of having it be like this, like, well, this just happened by accident, I don't know what this is. There's this kind of fundamental distrust when I'm looking at a social media feed, because I wonder, almost like by happenstance, it's like I'm just going through like a crowded room thrift store trying to find something valuable amidst a sea of junk. It would be much nicer to have some kind of competition in the space of who could organize information best. And when you have competition, you can also have a market, and almost have like a market for organizing information, that you would subscribe to someone and you would pay them a little bit of money to subscribe to their feed, and they could draw from all over social media and kind of create like this digest and have like a marketplace for that type of activity. That'd be super cool.
Well,
Like a professional curator.
you're talking about Joe Rogan's main strength to culture. That's the main thing he has of value to give to us, is exposing you to Jordan Peterson, exposing you to Douglas Murray, exposing you to the Weinsteins, exposing you to Roger Penrose himself, exposing you to everyone he finds interesting to talk to.
Yeah, he's a curator of personalities.
He's not a good he's not a good thinker. He's not a particularly good talker. He's just good at knowing what he's interested in, and giving that, the site of his interest, a soapbox to stand on.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's a very powerful method of communication, yeah. And that's the kind of ability, or that's the kind of artistic medium Jade and I are building for ourselves in the form of the mandarinmagazine.com, where that is our own expression of how we feel and where our interests are going, specifically expressed through the voices of everyone who saw the magazine and wanted to contribute literature of their own.
Yeah.
And that's what it'll become at these baby stages. It just has to be built out from its core, and have us regularly creating our own literature so that particles can attract to other particles.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something that's almost feels very inevitable about the fact that social media is going to become more high quality and more curated, because you just can't go on in a way that, like, it's really weird that like most articles that you read are actually kind of written from Twitter headlines. Most things in the media are like just scraping the top off of whatever bubbles up from Twitter, and there's not a lot of conversation happening on these platforms where you're not really sure if there's a lot of doubt about like whether or not the person is even real. That's like saying something. So there's nothing to grab onto. There's nothing to respond to, and therefore it becomes this like sea of atomized people just only talking to the void, with no one talking to each other, and that's like not a satisfying experience.
No, it's not communication.
No, it's just pure unredeemed shouting match competition for voice volume level, basically, where the content of what you say almost doesn't matter, and it's just the position in the feed that matters, and that's what everyone's gaming for.
It's interesting to me at the moment how you can, the reason you can definitively say that social media can't continue in this way and has to continue in that way is because you're making it so.
Well, yeah, and I always just like try to not talk about...
you can say that definitively because you know it. The reason you know it is because that's a fact you're making yourself.
Yeah, this isn't like an opinion I have. It's more like kind of just my thoughts on what's happening.
There's this gray area of your thoughts of what's happening become what happens.
Yeah.
Like when the interviewer in the Thiel interview asks Peter Thiel where he thinks things are going, I privately go like...
He has some plan about that.
I privately go, well, where Peter Thiel thinks it's going is going to really heavy-handedly like push things to go that way. Like him thinking it's going that way is going to make him create things in that direction.
Yeah. Well, I think that more people had the ability to... I wish the ability to create a social network could be democratized to where you didn't have to be fucking Zuckerberg.
This is another thing. You're just saying what Satellite is doing.
Well, but I'm saying in more general terms beyond what Satellite is doing, because I don't want to just have everything just be like a pitching for Satellite. I do it too much as it is. I just want to talk about in general terms. Wouldn't it be sick if like a person in the future could be like, okay, so here's a perfect example of it. Like in like the 2000s, they came out with the first primitive like website builders, like WordPress or whatever, and like suddenly you didn't have to be a programmer to make a website. You didn't have to be a fucking nerd. You could just install this thing and then click some buttons and then configure it, and then there you go. And it still takes a little bit of like instruction following ability and basic literacy, but it's not like impossible for the average person to do it. I think it's like what it's going to get to with like social networks. It would be awesome if in the future you could just be like, a person could be like, what if there was a social network as an abstract thing that isn't even necessarily talking about the internet, because the internet and the world are going to become merged to where, kind of like how now people, when they say like, hey, just like send me that information, it's implied that you're doing it with a phone. Like,
you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So like in the future, they'll be like, what if there was a social network where these people had this role and this people had this role and they interacted in this way, and because I think that like kids are gonna grow up and they're gonna develop an intuition about social dynamics in a very concrete way that previous generations don't have, and they're gonna see exactly how there's this economy of influence and there's this economy of novelty and stuff that is currently being manifest, it's going to become very day-to-day and very commonplace to understand exactly how this works. And they're going to look at previous generations like us even, and they're going to be like, wow, it's really naive that you guys didn't understand that like everyone's just trying to get attention and you took so seriously these like bots that were at the top of these feeds and stuff like that. People are going to develop kind of like psychological filters to handle that. But I think the positive side of that is that maybe there could be like some really cool micro, like thousands and thousands of micro social networks that were all like little niche organisms that did something for a few people or something. Like that would be super cool. Instead of everyone having to just like stand in line at the Walmart of social networks for like 80 years to get what they need. And like probably never, like by the time you get to the front of the line and be like, oh, it's closed.
Yeah.
All your information's been sold. Like if you would have been on this platform 5 years ago, you would have been great, but sorry, you're late to the party.
Right.
It's like the opportunity thing is like a system where the early adopters get massive rewards and everyone else gets fucked is not a good system. Well, I mean, it's good for some people, but it's not a sustainable system. It's not a stable system. Yeah, I don't know. I just think like that's pretty much going to be the story of 2020 of this decade is going to be the decade of decentralization and maybe. Yeah, I think we're going to see some things that make Bitcoin look small.
Of course.
On the internet. I think on the internet we're going to see some things that are going to make Bitcoin seem like, oh, that was fun, but this is really the thing that, holy shit. You know, so I just wonder what the fuck is... There's probably many such things right now that are just lurking beneath the surface that... could make you wildly rich if you actually knew it and if you saw clearly what was happening. That's pretty crazy to think about such things lurking in our midst. And it's not like a lottery number where it's just like a random thing that if you had the power to see, like the fucking seeing stone, the Palantir, you know, like just like Peter Thiel's company, which was named after the crystal ball. Fucking. That's the thing about Peter Thiel is like I was like reading his bio and stuff, and I was like, you know, this guy. It's really hard to categorize because like I really love what he's saying about all his like philosophy and stuff like that, but at the same time what Palantir, his company, does sounds pretty fucking dystopian. So but it makes me think like maybe I'm just assuming that, and like maybe someone's going to make this dystopian technology anyway, so at least there's this guy who, if I believe him, isn't, you know, has some good ideas about some stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather Peter Thiel be in charge of fucking Palantir than like the DNC or the CCP or whatever. Yeah.
What I'm high again.
I don't know. I was just going off on some riff about, I don't know where I started on that, but
curation is communication.
Curation is communication.
And I was going like, what is communication? Are we communicating right now? Is that communication?
Well, there is some curation implicit in what we're saying because we're deciding what to talk about and what not to talk about. And we spend the week previous to each podcast compiling a rough list of things that are worth talking about. And that is that's the foundation of communication, is deciding what to say and then actually figuring out how to say it.
I'm just like, well, now it's like me stepping up to the void and maybe like jumping in too much to the deep end of like, how do I know communication has happened? Because I'm roughly perceiving that something is being communicated to me personally from within, that like I don't have any way of assessing what that message is until I'm like 90, maybe.
That is, Alex, that is a very unique quandary you find yourself in. Not many people deal with this. Not many people.
They're gonna deal with it after I'm done.
Yeah, I suppose. I
Because they
don't.
will have my body of work in the
I
world.
don't think about when I'm 90. I just think, yeah, I don't know.
How could you not?
Because when I think about when I'm 90, I'm just gonna think about.
Well, okay, so this is partly my own like nihilism and my own suicidalism, but also like one of my superpowers is maybe it's a similar attitude to Elon Musk's of like he's not excited in life unless it's fucking space travel and changing the entire energy infrastructure of the world.
Yeah. That dude has a pretty high bar he set for himself.
And I'm
Right.
I'm in a
Yeah.
similar boat. I don't care about any of this unless it's like on the most epic scales imaginable. I don't care about making music unless I can be creating a catalog of like what's the most albums a single band or artist has like made that have been good albums, like maybe 7, maybe probably more like 4 or 5 albums. And so I'm not interested in making music unless I can make like 20. I'm not interested in living a life unless I can live 3 lives at once in a row.
Where do you get this attitude from? Where does this come from?
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I see what
Yeah.
everyone else has done and what everyone else says this is for, and I'm so fucking bored.
Yeah, that's, when you try, that's like when you strive for things, the price you pay is not being satisfied. It's like, it's very heavy metal, actually. This kind of like dissatisfaction and this like, almost like rage against the mundane or something like that, that shows up in like a lot of Nordic death metal. I think which actually comes from like the fact that like you have somewhat of an sort of like an overdeveloped society a little bit where things are a little bit too perfect and a little bit too boring.
Well, it seems like to do anything less with your life is just disrespectful to being how rich we are.
Yeah, in terms of like just like the means we have available now and the fucking weird exceptional moment in history we're living in.
Yeah.
I feel that, man. I also feel the same way.
Like we could be burning the earth to a husk right now to hear the liberal take on it. So like what are we burning it for?
Yeah, I really hope that it's worth it. I do see that. Like if it, on a certain, this is where it comes back to embracing reality. Like what is happening, not what should be happening, not what we wish was happening or what some people claim will happen or did happen, but literally just like objectively right now, we're clearly going through a transformative process where we are using a fuck ton of resources of the earth and really changing it. So I think that everyone knows, even the people who are super, super environmentalist, know that this is pretty inevitable. That I don't think there's many climate activists who still believe that they're gonna just like save the day. Like that died with Captain Planet. I think that now it's a kind of like reckoning where it's like almost going, well, how do we react to this? It's going to happen. Do we just like, do we feel bad? Do we seek forgiveness? Do we seek penitence? Or do we try to make it worth it? All this destruction that was wrought, like all the fact that there's like, billions of people on Earth like working as part of like a technological engine. Like, what exactly is it for? You know what I mean? Like Elon Musk has this sense of things. I think like he speaks a lot about the kind of time we're living in is like this weird little window where we have the means to maybe create a multiplanetary civilization, and it's very unlikely that we're going to have that window, or it's possible that it might not be open for very long. And so, like, strike while the iron is hot. There is no like it would be a huge sort of like forfeiture or something to not take the opportunity that like so much was sacrificed to get to. Because if human, you know, I always think of everything as like sort of like a graph where there's like some big bubble. If we just go on some big, huge crash, it might be a long, long time before humans get back to the peak of technological integration that we have now. I don't think it'll be like super long in like geological terms, but in human lifetimes terms, it could be a very, very long time.
Do you... Oh... I'm like...
How many cigarettes have you smoked this morning?
3.
Okay, all right.
But each one of them is hit. I'm in a very sensitive state.
Good.
I'm in a very sensitive, receptive state, and I don't have any energy to like portray a sense that I know what I'm doing. I don't have much energy to put forth that image, so I'm very open to the base first cause level of my experience.
Yeah.
I'm very close to that right now.
It's good, man.
But what do you... Before I ask this prompt, I will make a note about that subjective state that I'm in. That this is an archetype whenever I'm getting ready to record a new song in Sacramento. A sort of mushy decomposition of my entire psyche occurs so that I'm maximally flexible for the needs of the studio when I'm in front of a microphone and the red light is on.
It's like the goo stage that the caterpillar goes through in the chrysalis.
That's right. Like, I'm familiar with what it's like. I call it being down the chute.
Okay.
And when you're getting ready to perform, it's the same phenomena of going down the chute. And it's not about having your feet under you so much as just embracing the momentum of being down the chute so that you can like keep flowing with the momentum when that chute brings you to your moment where you must act. Like out of this great open disorder is what allows a really good performance to come through and lock in. But the prompt, one of your prompts was about power.
Yeah.
And something like a secret to having power is just noticing that you have it.
It's not about creating it, it's about realizing that you're just pretending that you don't have it this whole time. It's about noticing, yeah.
And what kind of frame of mind were you in when you said that?
I was a little drunk. And sometimes when I'm a little drunk, I have I was with Duffy's, and I was just sitting there, and it occurred to me that, like, anyone in this room could do anything they really wanted to, but most people don't really want to do anything out of the ordinary. They just want to sit in a bar, like me, and that's what we're doing. And it was like this, the world is held together by people's intentions, not their abilities. So the limiting factor on what we do is really what we want to do. And will, as an aspect of nature, it's like this idea of like, I had this whole discussion the other day with a friend of mine about like capability versus willingness. And it came down to the idea that willingness is kind of a subset of capability, because sometimes it's like willingness is the leading edge of capability. It's the first thing you have to address to make something possible. Like, and so you find that power comes with responsibility, so that's why you're unwilling to admit that you have it. Which is just an interesting thought. So on one hand, it's like, gee, that's great, because then all I have to do is admit that I have power and take responsibility for my life. But on the other hand, it's like, shit, I have to take responsibility for my life. Me? Not someone else? Fuck. I wanted this guy to do it. Oh, shit. See what I'm saying? So it's like, it's weird. And I don't know. I think it's like, I don't know if it makes it easier or harder or something. I guess if you think of yourself as a being that isn't fucked up, and you think of yourself as basically good and innocent, it is easier because you're not afraid of doing anything really bad, or hurting anyone, or or like being condemned or something like that. And that's why the guilty conscience is a very disempowered person, because they're afraid of hurting anyone. Therefore, they don't want to claim any power or responsibility over the world. They just want to feel bad about existing or something like that. And I find myself, I can even notice this on a micro scale. And when I'm less comfortable around a crowd of people, I feel generally more guilty about everything.
Sure.
So, whereas like when I'm with my friends who I've known for a long time, and I know that I could say the stupidest shit and they'd still laugh at it, even though it's not funny, I say all kinds of stuff. I'm just like really free and feel really great. And that's what people do for each other, is they we can't admit to ourselves that we're good, so maybe we can kind of make other people feel that they're okay and like mutually do this thing. But yeah, and that's why sociality is the thing that draws people back from the brink a lot of times. Isolation kills because you don't have that recourse. You get sucked into this thing. But I don't know. I guess you could frame this power as just one lens on this, but it seems like something that is quite relevant these days. We're witnessing the dynamics. We're witnessing a kind of economy of emerging of social and political and cultural and financial dynamics into a kind of weird hybrid chimera system that is completely renegotiating all of our interpersonal contracts and stuff with each other and with the world. And so it's worth thinking about, what the fuck is power? Where does it come from? And is it good or bad? And why?
I guess I've been using my power to abide and not step away and not retreat. Like using my power to hold the line instead of stepping back when I'm scared or in isolation, and using my power to hold the line and wait for my moment to act. And then when I see the moment to act, like taking it. There's a heavy subjective gravity to, like, I guess it's a kind of ego death experience, and people with original sin complexes like rush for any chance to compromise their souls and compromise their egos and throw in with some cause that's greater than themselves. Or like if you like psychedelic drugs, then like you just annihilate your fucking conscious mind with like way too many of them, because your conscious mind is this unconsciously granted to be this guilty party. But miniature ego deaths happen naturally all the time. And the creative process is about like keeping your eyes open while that happens. And then you become privy to a deeper seat of identity than these multitudinous births and deaths on the surface of your experience. If you can like be present through a full death of a time of your life, then you come out of it on the other side with so much more understanding of the natural processes of the psyche and this person behind the whole thing watching it all happen.
Yeah, that's what you meant when you said presiding over multiple births and deaths a bit earlier. Yeah, I like that word, preside, almost like you're like a master of ceremonies. You're like, this is necessary. This is proper.
When I have any sort of strength to act, I act to like be a master of ceremonies and like clean up the area for the next bonfire.
Well, this is why people are led to prophylactically induce a death rebirth cycle by going through some kind of like experience that causes them to their old that the current version of themselves has to radically change or adapt to handle, because by doing so you ward off the angel of death that's going to come fuck you up if you don't do that. Like, you either voluntarily have to change and rebirth yourself, or circumstance is just going to be like, well, you didn't make a decision, so here's your default. Now you're going to get a divorce, and you're going to have to do it. Just here you go. Yeah, I guess that's like basically how much. If you don't accept that you have power and responsibility, you're going to get all the responsibility without the power. So, responsibility in the most basic sense of the term, in the most unconscious sense of the term. That just you're a part of it, not that you admit that you are or anything like that. I've just seen, I wonder at what point people, when you're in some kind of crisis, one outlet, one impulse is to just dissociate from it and be like, well, this is happening.
Right.
You know what I mean? Instead of going like, I'm doing this.
Just distract.
Yeah.
And it happens anyway, but it happens in the unconscious, and your surface experience is just these things happening to you, and you're reacting, and at some point the unconscious birth-death thing is complete, and you're at some sort of new normal. But that isn't really in coherence with the principle of lucid dreaming, which I think is what we're trying to do here in Waking Reality, is wake up to the fact that we're living our own narrative. And there's no one writing that narrative except you.
Okay, small tangent. Has science discovered why the fuck ostriches actually put their head in the sand? How did that evolve? How is that possible? Because that's an actual thing they do, right? If I'm not mistaken. How is that possible? How is it that any ostrich that has that behavior just did not, like a wolf comes up and goes like, or wherever the fucking Africa, cheetah, lion, whatever, I don't know, presumably eats ostriches. They just go, oh, now it's even easier to eat you. Like, how did what? You know what I'm saying? Is there some very strange quirk of ostrich evolution that they're more of a danger to themselves when they're scared than actual predators? Like, what is
Probably.
Yeah, and so that's like, it has to be, right? Because that's the only way that it would evolve, and wouldn't be like selected out of the ostrich behavior set of things. Anyways, that's an aside, but the ostrich thing. We are lucid dreaming as a way of taking a peek behind the curtain without knocking it down completely. It's a way of drugging yourself while you take a look at something that's kind of hard to see, and kind of just see the vague outlines of a thing and grow up towards it in the dark. Although I'm not a lucid dreamer, so maybe my experience is a little bit caricatured. I don't know what experiences you've had to that effect. The most I've ever gotten out of lucid dreaming is a sense of clarity before I wake up, where I can see things in a plainer way. And I can see things and I feel like I'm seeing more truthfully than I normally see, because my conscious linguistic brain hasn't fully come online yet.
Yeah.
And so I see the truth of my psyche laid out before me and what is actually important to me. And it's difficult to articulate in inverse proportion to my ability to talk about it, which is, of course, well, this is a very familiar line of thought, but that we've talked about before. But I don't know if that's the same thing as lucid dreaming, or maybe if lucid dreaming is a state where you can actually get some more concrete formulations of things without giving up that clear perspective. I don't know.
Lucid dreaming presents itself to me in this moment as a which mic am I on?
Hopefully not mine.
Well, I'll figure out the mixing when I care about that kind of thing. Lucid dreaming presents itself to me in this moment as a kind of way of reading the signs. If you did find yourself in a dream and then you realized that you were dreaming, all the paraphernalia around yourself would then reveal its true nature as that of a symbol, of an inner experience. And that's a way of reading your physical life as well. Objects as symbols. Physical reality as a set of symbols. And what the meaning of those symbols is purely your own narrative to adhere to or to adjust as you go.
Well, most people do seem to be perfectly content with considering their thoughts as symbols of who they are, but they seem to be less willing to consider external objects as symbols of who they are, even though on a very physical level, thoughts are just patterns in the physical world, in your brain, and they have some kind of privileged position as physical phenomenon artifacts that you pay special attention to as your identity to organize your life. But there's plenty of things in the physical world that are objects that have just as much, if not more, influence on your life than your thoughts. So symbols.
I think it's a really crucial human way to look at the physical world, is at each physical piece as a different symbol, standing for an inner meaning. That lens is your way to interface with this physical world. Terence McKenna's "The World is Made of Language."
Yeah.
It's the same thing. That more open space moment I was describing that I had last night, that felt like a lucid dreaming. That had a theme of lucid dreaming to it, where there wasn't really any action proscribed for me in that moment.
Yeah.
Just the patterned actions all fell away, and I was just left to ponder the event of existing itself in a moment between the unconscious taking it for granted what each object was for. All that kinetic action of each object in each mental pattern, all that kinetic action just died away, and each object was just standing as itself, able to be read in a certain way and reacted to in the way that I then read that object to be, but like hinging at that previous moment to action of just potential.
Look at these kids.
There's some kids making animal noises.
Yeah, you know that I was like looking around and trying to see like what it's like games like an I Spy game or whatever. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Like, what a
Yeah.
you know, like right where like I had a thought earlier that this like little three-eyed camera thing staring at us. This phone itself is kind of like a symbol of like what's going on right now. It's a weird. I feel different because of this. So that just being this technology being around us is just being surrounded by technology influences your sense of identity definitely. Probably a kind of a weird and an interesting example of this that's kind of like on the borderline, quite literally, between the inner and outer world is your clothes.
1 second. Okay.
Like like if I said like, what does this tripod mean? What does that symbolize? You know, I don't fucking know. But if I said, what does this leather jacket symbolize? Well, then it's like suddenly, well, it's a more reasonable question. Well, it's not your thoughts. It's an object, but it kind of is your thoughts. It's kind of like the idea of like, this is parallel to the idea between like speech and curation. Like, you didn't think that leather jacket into existence, but you did think about the fact that you put it on. So in some sense, you're participating in its presence here, now. So there's a lot of, you could probably write many volumes on the significance of the leather jacket, and the whole point is that it isn't many volumes. It's one concrete gestalt symbol that is composes in a very compressed way a whole story about you and the world and how you see yourself. And we both had a leather jacket when I showed up this morning.
Yes.
And we were both wearing the white t-shirt, and I had to take mine off because, and that's also means something. It's like, for chapter 1, you know what I mean? Like, male insecurity or whatever. See what I'm saying? You know what I mean? But it's a story about like my psyche and your psyche. It's like this, it's symbolic. It's deeply symbolic. Either its absence or presence is a very, leather jacket is something, it's like very, old. You typically only have one of them, or maybe a few if you're like fucking rich or something. Or just really love leather jackets. Or buy cheap leather, I don't know, there's various permutations of this. Why I think most likely it's because you're like just that kind of person for whatever reason. You just always have to. I only have one myself. I'm kind of a one leather jacket kind of guy.
Your tangents get really ridiculous sometimes.
Tangents on tangents on tangents. Okay, yeah. I visualize it sort of like those gear thingies where okay, that's another tangent.
Yeah, your tangents get to like Brett Weinstein level sometimes.
I can't stand Brett Weinstein's. I mean, okay, I think he's an intelligent person, but goddamn, his speaking style is fucking hard to follow.
Well, he presents his inconsequential tangents with the same professorial gravitas.
I know.
As the actual point he's trying to make.
I know, it's so annoying. It's like, don't juice me up like that, man. I thought you were going somewhere with that. Yeah. Now I'm gun shy. Yeah, the professorial gravitas is fucking exhausting. I think it's much better to understate than overstate. Unless, reserve your overstatement for really important things, if you can help it. But I don't know where I was going. Oh yeah, but the symbol thing, clothing.
The leather jacket, like today, it's simply a symbol of me being on the retreat and needing armor.
Yeah.
And I know that the weather is fine and the air feels good, but I don't care to find out. I just want to I just want to be warm enough that I can preside over a softer, more vulnerable, subjective experience in public, and like just have one more layer over and deal with body temperature like on erring on the side of too warm than too cold.
That's what a leather jacket does. It's like a shell.
Yeah.
It's like when you put your finger too close to like a snail, it just goes like. It just like wants to. Okay.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I've obviously thought a lot about the physical universe as symbol construction. My entire physical appearance perpetually is a reflection of this idea. And whether by accident or purpose, like my name coincides with my look and what I want to be about in terms of being a fountain of radiating creativity is illustrated in the way I look as well. And like I want to get more bang for my buck out of like what I'm doing with my life. I want like the fucking time scepter in Tenet, where
Time scepter?
yeah, the algorithm is physically represented.
Oh yeah. Right.
Like
in different pieces, yeah.
Like looking at it is knowing the algorithm or something.
Something like that. Yeah. I'm still not that clear on that, but
I want to get the most mileage out of artistic expression possible. So I want someone who doesn't even have any knowledge of my music or my writing or any other thing I end up doing. I still want them to get experience of it just by looking at me.
I don't think anyone would look at you and think like, yeah, this guy probably works, he's probably an insurance salesman or something like that, you know what I mean? Probably, yeah, it is kind of, though, it's much harder now. These days it's harder to look strange because everyone just looks strange. Although, it is coming kind of full circle to where a lot of the unconventional looks that people have are very similar to each other.
I very rarely see actual original looks.
Yeah, right.
The
Non-normative doesn't mean original.
It's very, very normal to see what dyed hair, piercings, tattoos. None of that is visually exciting anymore.
I mean, I've seen people that have some pretty cool tattoos. It's like those. I don't know what. It's like cafe chic or something. I don't know exactly how you would describe this. It's like a sort of derivative of like hipster-ish. You know, not exactly hipster. It's more like a kind of like derivative of that, where like you just have like geometric symbols and stuff on your body because you're like, yeah, I don't know, like just like these vaguely kind of like alt indie, something that would be like on an indie album cover or something, like on your body, like that aesthetic is. I feel like it's just like an artistic form at this point. Like people don't do it because it's original; they do it because that's what they identify with, which is presumably why people get tattoos. You know, I mean, it's better than getting like fucking Harley Davidson or something on your, you know what I mean, or like Mickey Mouse or just like Dutch Brothers. I've seen. I don't know what it is about Chico, but I have seen multiple people with the Dutch Brothers tattoo. And I'm just like, bro. Whoa. Okay, a bumper sticker is like, okay,
that's bad enough.
Maybe if you're driving like a shitty like Acura or something, like yeah, fucking slap a Dutch Brothers sticker on that thing. But like your body, what the fuck, bro? You realize it's a coffee shop, right? And like, why?
Not a great coffee shop.
It's not even that great. Like, yeah, there's like, I guess like teenagers who play like loud music or something. So it's like kind of cool if you're like a teenager. It's awesome. But like, I mean, I remember going there when I was fucking awesome when I was a teenager. Not gonna lie. But it's weak coffee, and it's just like it's not super. There's nothing like. Yeah, it's just maybe just because like the dude is like smoking his sunglasses or something. Great branding, to tell you the truth. It's great branding. can make people want to get tattoos of it. But I think that symbolizes something. It symbolizes this kind of just like basic, it's like something about Chico's like just commitment to just everything being kind of chill and normal. That we spoke about the other day, like one quality of Chico that has like sort of insulated us from the worst of the social upheavals surrounding COVID shit.
It's a commitment to chillness
and normalcy, and just kind of like, don't fuck. Life is okay. Just don't fuck with things.
It's been a great immune system.
It has been,
and that's directly related to why the response to homeless people living in the park has inspired so much anger and ire in me, is because that cultural Chico identity is, in my mind, very closely associated to just being closer to nature, which is very closely associated to having a huge fucking park with huge old growth trees in the middle of the city. And so like that's the immune system that's gotten us through the fucking apocalypse, apparently.
Oh yeah, dude. If there wasn't a park here, I don't know what people like. They would have been
like
miserable,
that
man.
psychological immune system that Chico has. It has a physical site. It's Bidwell Park.
Yes, it is. It's a reservoir of
so
like,
it must be protected for everyone's sake. For everyone's sake.
Even homeless people's sake. Yeah.
Yes.
Because they need respite. Yeah. Can you imagine if you're living in like, I don't really know, I'm just gonna say pull some random, probably fictitious name of a city out of my hat.
Vacaville?
Vacaville. There you go. Perfect. Actually, that's even better of an example than I was gonna come up with. Vacaville. What a place. Or I should say Fairfield Vacaville, whatever that monstrosity, conglomeration, agglutination of urban detritus that is. It's like just this fucking, just like, it's like if you just took a bunch of like freeways and
it's this non-place.
Just like a big, like, just like sweep up with a dustpan of just like various like urban development, and just like kind of just like shove it in a corner.
Just San Francisco sneeze. And the snot.
Just kind of like stuck to somewhere around in the peripheral vision. Yeah, I know. That is a truly schizophrenic, soulless region. Well, there's an In-N-Out burger there. That's the only good thing that ever came out of Vacaville that I've like stopped at a couple times and like but like
In-N-Out is a fucking pillar of California civilization.
It really is.
Like, did you see those lines in 2020? The lines for the In-N-Out drive-thru all year. That was clearly the only thing. The only cultural institution, the only place to see other human beings for long stretches.
Yes.
In-N-Out proved its valor and its value as a business.
Right.
Like, they stepped up to the fucking plate. So, the fucking psychological health of the state is on our shoulders.
Yeah.
Like, good thing we pay all our employees hella fucking money. And keep everything up to a hella high standard.
Also notice,
because we're just going to take all this business with alacrity.
Right.
And the populace needs us to, apparently.
Yeah.
It makes me want some In-N-Out.
Yeah. There's something about like that normalcy, the normalcy bias or something, I think it's called, where you just think that like, well, what's most likely to happen is what is just most. I mean, from like a Bayesian perspective, there's like a certain logic to that, but Chico has a very strong sense of that, I think, which is, on one hand, what protects us from stuff like COVID mania, but on the other hand, it's what makes people get Dutch Brothers tattoos because they're just really comfortable with the basic mundane aspects of things. And like, I don't know, I think actually that's really good. That's why San Francisco is just losing its shit right now, because San Francisco is a place that they're always like okay, if in a world where like like society is very conservative, and the main problem is that things are like a little bit too stuffy, and like people are like, San Francisco is a great place to be because these people are kind of a little bit out of their mind. But when the world is out of its mind, you don't want to be in a place that is even more out of its mind, because then it just gets to like parody levels of insanity, and the human organism can't, like, it's not healthy. It's not healthy to I think like cities in general are not coping well with the kind of upheaval of life. I think that's probably, I predict that there's going to be a massive deurbanization trend in the next couple decades, where people are going to move back to the countryside, and we're going to create a high-tech version of cottagecore merged with solar punk. And it's going to be dope.
I'm committing, in my long-term life plan, I'm committing to Chico as a home base that I orbit around, because I think this is the city of the future. This is a testing ground. This is a petri dish. Which towns have the most robust immune systems for cultural insanity and biological storms blowing through? Which towns and cities are the most resilient? Well, this one is really fucking resilient.
On average,
Like the George Floyd shit happened, COVID happened.
People didn't fucking cut each other's throats here.
Fucking huge political butting heads. Trump, the inflammation happened, and Chico is so far remaining Chico.
It hasn't lost its soul.
So it's demonstrated its viability as a model for the city of the future. And so what are traits of Chico-ness is having a center to it, a center. Vacaville does not have a center.
Vacaville is a city that's based on it's like a cow. Like it's just like, it's like a parody of itself. Like I don't know. It's
But Chico has a center. The center itself is nature, deeply rooted nature. So like physically putting a site of that in the center of your town and building the town around that. Just having something for cultural identity to accrete to over time. Not just this huge rushing fucking river of highways that there's no center, there's nothing to accrete onto.
Just like interchanges and just everything, just almost like a thing that disperses any kind of, can you imagine like you're in Vacaville and you're like, maybe I should go take a stroll. Like, so you're gonna walk into like 4 overpasses, and were you gonna go meet people down at like the local Starbucks, right off of like I-5 or something, or whatever, 80, whatever it is?
Yeah, that's what people do.
And that's what people do. Yeah, that's what people do. It's just like
they meet at Starbucks.
God damn, man. Whereas like in Chico, Starbucks is like this like cringe place that isn't downtown, but I don't understand how they even make any profit at all, because no one goes there except like very naive new Chico State students. The only people who go there, but like it's just like, it's like quiet. It's like the Amish just like it's like a shunning, like locals like shun that place because
you do get the immigrants going through, and it is very valuable in that sense, like the international community.
That's true. I suppose it has a place, right? But it isn't something that the city itself that it values or identifies as.
No.
Yeah. I saw, it was funny. I was at Stouffville, and there's this group of like, it must have been from like some like Saudi Arabia or something, because like their parents were there, and there was like 4 or 5 like international students from like some Middle Eastern place, and like the dad / patriarch dude had like one of those like looked like he was straight out of like Casablanca or something, like the little square round hat thingy and like the thing, and like
wow.
And he was like very like, they looked like they just walked out of like like a movie or something, and I was like, oh, that's cool. So they came and they ordered, and I was like, you could see just like the bewildered look on these kids' faces. They looked around. They're just like,
Wow.
like, and I was like, that's weird, like an outsider's perspective. And so I walked out and I'm like, yep, sure enough, there's like 3 brand new Mercedes just parked along the curb. I'm like, all just like idling, with no one in the car. I'm like, oh, did you all just leave your cars idling? That's what they do apparently. Like, so well, cultural differences, you know? And so I was like, yeah, those are all the stereotypes I have confirmed of Saudi Arabians. So it's like, it's I don't know, from an outsider's perspective, I don't know what people think about Chico. They probably don't really, they just think, oh, this is just like a normal town or whatever. But yeah, I think if you live here for a while, you definitely realize how deeply rooted in normalcy seems to be. Very deep, very purple, almost 50-50.
Yeah.
I actually, that was in the Gavin Newsom recall. Butte County was actually the most equal county. It was almost exactly 50-50.
Oh. Well, that's
Yeah.
it's a symptom of the illness, but also like why we are healthy of all the neighborhoods of California.
Yeah, I think that there's something good about diversity. Is that a controversial statement? Am I going to get canceled for saying that? I mean, like, political diversity. It's nice when there's political diversity because it makes people, regardless of your opinions, a little more honest because you don't have the conceit of everyone around you pretending to agree with you. You can't fall back on that kind of thing where everything in you know, like ultra blue places becomes, or like I suppose ultra red for that matter, although you see it more with ultra blue because of the fact that ultra blue maps onto high population density and thus these people have a chance to get around each other. I'm sure if there was a massive convention and a motorcycle rally of ultra red, you'd have the same kind of virtue signaling going on. But you know, what we see is college campuses, which are like little nuclei of ultra blueness and bureaucracy and stuff like that. And so that's where you get all like the craziness is people who are all so similar in their beliefs that they have to one up each other. And where like your political beliefs just become like this currency, this social as a substitute for social currency because, you know, made more extreme by the fact that you're all coming from different places, and so the only lowest common denominator thing you can relate to is like, oh, I'm like a totally woke person from Tennessee. Oh, I'm from Oregon. Like, oh yeah, at least we agree that like men are trash, right? Yeah. Like, okay, great. Y'all are friends now. Yeah. So, like, that's probably like a parody, but not really.
Not even.
Sadly, it's not. A lot of blame to go around, but that's just one example. But yeah, Chico, I feel like is it's just you have those people at the university, and then you have like a bunch of like almond farmers.
Yep.
Going like, y'all are nuts.
Word. Let's call it.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.